Alrighty guys, what you are looking at is a Mac Pro. I haven't had one of these in about 5 years. The OG viewers may remember that back in 2015 or so, I had a Mac Pro 1,1, which is the original 2006 model. I'd gotten that one off eBay for pretty cheap. Ended up selling it later because I made a profit on it. And ever since then I've kind of wanted another one, but the prices of them in the used market were a little bit prohibitive. However, this is a 4,1. This is a 2009 model, and the price was low enough that I decided to just go for it. So with that said, I got this thing locally, kind of. I bought it on eBay, but the people that I bought it from were here in town, and so I just went ahead and picked it up locally as to try to avoid damage to these handles and stuff. And speaking of the condition, I literally just brought it home, haven't even plugged it in yet, so you guys are along for the ride. Looking at it, it does have, obviously couple of minor dings and dents, being a 10 11-year-old computer, but to be honest, it looks pretty good, especially at least from this side. Let's go ahead and check out the other. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It just has some stuff that may or may not come off with some alcohol, but obviously it has the cheese grater design that the G5 started with and these ended with in 2012. I really wish that Apple would have continued to make this computer in its current form. Now, I'm really glad that they did with the new one, because it's literally pretty much the same concept as this, a desktop, workstation class, upgradable machine and whatnot, but obviously those are way too expensive for me, so here I am with these original cheese grater models, but I really like these. And if we take a look at the specs, or the sticker back here, you can see that this is a base model 2009, so it has a single 2.66 gigahertz Intel Xeon, and of course that also means that these are single processor only, whereas I think starting with these, they have a separate processor card. And so anyways, I can't upgrade this to dual CPUs right out the gate. I'd have to purchase the new card, and those things are super expensive. So what I'm going to do is I plan on just upgrading the CPU by itself. In other words, a 6-core version of this with one of the higher end Xeons at least beats a 3,1, which is a 2008 8-core model. So I should be able to get better performance than a dual processor 2008 even with just one. So that should be okay. And he also told me, the seller, also told me that it had 8 gigs of RAM, and originally it was supposed to have an NVIDIA GT120, but however the seller told me that that card was actually dead, so he put in a Radeon 5770 for me, and I do have a Radeon RX 580 on the way that should be here in a couple of days, so there'll probably be another video on this machine once I get those parts. And like I said, I also plan on doing the processor and the RAM and stuff. With that said, let's go ahead and open her up. I can go ahead and show you the inside. So what I like to see right off the bat is that all of the drive bays are here. And you can see there is our ATI Radeon, and I believe this is a Mac flashed card. It should be, at least. It looks like it looks like it is original to the Mac Pro, so we should have a boot screen. Of course, that's going to change when I put the RX 580 in, but I don't really care. And then down here you can see is our processor and RAM card. I guess that's kind of like the main motherboard, but obviously we have one up there too. But this board specifically here houses the CPU and the RAM. It looks like those are 2 gig sticks each. I don't know, we'll see when I boot it up. Oh wait, no, this one only has 4 RAM slots, so it should have 8 gigs of RAM, and we're going to bump that up to 16 or 32 later. But anyways, it looks pretty good on the inside. I do notice the case is a little bit redesigned compared to a 2008, but it's kind of nice that the processors and the RAM are on a removable card, so I could eventually upgrade it if I wanted to. But without further ado, I have a cheap SSD that I'm going to throw in here because these are limited to SATA 2, so I didn't want to put like a really nice Samsung drive in there. Rather, I'll just use that PNY one, which is, kind of low end, but it should be still a lot better than a hard drive. He also mentioned, so we have one hard drive here. You can see that it's actually an original Apple drive, which is kind of nice. I'm just going to leave that in there, and then I'm just probably going to fab up some kind of mount for the SSD there. I may have to leave this drive bay out now that I'm looking at it, but we'll see when I put it in. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and probably make a boot disk, install the SSD in the machine, and then we'll try and boot her up. Alright, so there ain't nothing like making it ghetto. As you might be able to tell, there we go. You may be able to tell that the SSD has been duct taped to the top, but I was able to take the 2 screws out on this drive rail, and that way, you know, when the computer is upright, you won't even be able to notice. And obviously this SSD weighs absolutely nothing, so I just taped it to the top and it's not going anywhere. Also move this drive over just because I'm OCD like that. But yeah, I think we are pretty much ready to go as far as booting this thing up. Alright guys, she is in the hole, plugged in and everything. This is going to be the first boot up. I have to hold these Command and R keys while I boot it up to get into internet recovery, so I have to use my foot. Let's go ahead and see if she's going to work. Aha, there we are. She's working. Well, if my camera would focus, that'd be awesome. But yeah, so now I need to see if I can get into this internet recovery thing, which might take a while, but I shall be back when I have an update. Alrighty guys, she is up and running finally. Due to my slow USB 2.0 flash drive, installing OS X took quite a long time, but now that it's up, it is all ready to go. I do apologize about the air conditioner noise, but it's pretty hot in here, so bear with me. But anyways, if we go and look at the spec sheet here, we can see, of course, it is an early 2009 Mac Pro. We got a 2.66 gigahertz Intel Xeon with 4 cores, 8 gigs of RAM, and of course that SSD we just threw in, and the 5770. So for now, this is how it's going to have to stay. What I'm going to be doing here shortly is I'm going to be starting to do things that are required for me to upgrade to Catalina, and those being, first off, we need to do the Mac Pro 5.1 EFI update. And in case you didn't know, the motherboards and everything in the 2009 versus the 2010 models, which are the 5.1s, it's pretty much identical, and so if you flash the updated EFI firmware of the 5.1 to our 4.1 here, we can use all the same CPUs and everything as the 2010. So I'm going to be doing that real quick. The other thing you need to do to upgrade to Catalina is, of course, have a GPU installed that supports metal, but we're covered there, as I said, with my RX 580 that is coming in the mail in a couple of days. We should be all good. So until that comes in, and of course the other CPU and the RAM that I also have on order comes in, I'm just going to be doing the firmware update, and then I'll just be leaving it on El Capitan, of course, until I get those parts, and then we'll go from there, upgrading to Catalina. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and take care of the firmware update. Alright, so the first step in doing this firmware upgrade, obviously besides getting the necessary files prepared on a flash drive here, is booting into recovery. And we're going to go ahead and type in this to disable the system integrity protection, and that should allow us to upgrade the firmware. So, alright, there we go. So now all we need to do is boot back into the OS, and then we'll run the files. Alrighty, so in the OS, all you have to do is go ahead and open this 2010 firmware update file. You don't need to actually run the installer, you just need to mount it to the desktop, and of course it won't work because it knows it's a 2009. But anyways, after you do that, then you run this custom firmware update tool, and then the only thing we need to do from here is just upgrade to our 2010 firmware. And as there, you can see kind of an explanation as to why you would want to do this, but yeah, we're going to be doing it just because I want to upgrade the CPU. So we'll go ahead and upgrade to 2010 firmware, go ahead and type in my password, and it should take it from there. And then of course it's going to have us reboot the computer, and then it'll do the firmware update on the next boot. So with that said, let's go and wait for that to finish. Alright, now to complete the update, all we have to do is, of course, with it powered off, press and hold the power button until it starts flashing, or I believe it said if we hear a beep. So all I have to do is hold it till it starts flashing or we get a beep. Ah, there we go. Alright, so now we just let it do its thing. You may also notice here that the firmware update screen looks a little bit different than the typical one, and that's a good indicator that you did it correctly. So now we just let this finish. Alright, so now that we're back in the OS, we can see now in the system profiler it says Mac Pro 5.1. So that is our indicator that it worked, and now for all intents and purposes this is a mid-2010 Mac Pro. So that means we can use any of the supported CPUs in the 2010, and we can also upgrade to High Sierra. However, my good friend DOSDude1 of course created the macOS Catalina patcher, which will allow this thing to run Catalina with no issues. So once we get our graphics card and all the other upgrades in there, I'll be doing that. I think for now I'm just going to upgrade it to High Sierra. That way the drive's already APFS and whatnot, but For now, that's about all we can do, so I will pick this video back up when we get the new parts.